Hi there, I am back, and in this video I am going to show how to work an ICord bind-off. I'm going to show you how to start the bind-off, and then I'll be working around and showing you how to graft the end of the ICord with the beginning of the ICord. Although I will be showing the bind-off as part of the surfing shawl, the ICord bind-off could be applied to other designs and also could be applied to a different number of stitches as part of the bind-off. And what I'm going to demonstrate is a 4-stitch ICord border. I am back and I have completed the inner border, and I've worked all the way to the point where I need to begin making my ICord bind-off or ICord border. I've left a couple of stitches, so I'm going to knit those 2 stitches to get to the end of the round. I'm going to transfer this marker temporarily. I don't need it for too long, but just for the illustration I'm going to transfer it. So the next what I need to do to begin my ICord bind-off is I need to get 4 stitches. I need to cast on 4 stitches on the left needle tip. The most straightforward way to do this is to cut the yarn and then rejoin that yarn here by casting on 4 stitches. Well, that means that I have 2 yarn tails that I need to weave in. So to prevent this, I'm going to show you this trick, and that is to actually wrap this stitch in here with this yarn, anchor that yarn, and then do your cast on. So to do this, I'm just going to lift this stitch from the left needle onto the right needle, bring the yarn from the back to the front, and then move the stitch back onto the left needle. Then I'm going to tug on this yarn because I don't want too much slack. So now really this marker is in the way. I don't need it anymore. I'm just going to take it off the needle and get rid of it. So then I'm going to give myself some slack in here and pull this needle all the way out, and I'm going to cast on 4 stitches on this left needle tip using the backward loop cast on method. And the straightforward way to do this is loop the yarn like so over your right thumb, and then just place a stitch on the needle and just pull on that yarn to tighten. So we have 1 stitch cast on. Then repeat the process. This is the 2nd stitch and 3rd stitch and 4th stitch. Then I'm going to move my yarn to the back and position my right needle tip so I can begin knitting. And I'm simply going to knit 3 stitches. And when I get to the 4th stitch, I'm going to knit it together with that stitch from the left needle, that 1st stitch on the left needle, through the back loop. So I'm going to knit both of those stitches together through the back loop. Okay, once I finish with this process, I'm going to transfer 4 stitches back from the right needle tip to the left needle tip, and then my yarn will be in the back in here on that stitch. That's perfectly fine. I'm just going to begin knitting anyway, and I don't need to pull on this too tightly. You just leave enough slack. It will come together eventually. So just begin knitting again, 3 stitches, and that fourth stitch you knit it together through the back loop with the stitch on the left needle behind it, the two stitches on the left needle, and then you transfer 4 stitches back from the right needle to the left needle tip, and you repeat the process until until basically what's happening right now is we're binding off these stitches. So I will continue this process until I come around all the way to the end in here, and I work my last stitch. And when I'm finished with that, I will come back and show you how to graft the end of the I-cord in here with the beginning of the I-cord in here, so it looks almost seamless. So I am back. I finished working the bind-off, and this is the ICord Bind-Off. And wanted to note, just so that to remind everyone, that you really need to keep your stitches loose, because this bind-off edge needs to stretch when you block your work. If you are normally a very tight knitter, then I would recommend getting a double pointed needle or even a straight needle. It doesn't have to be double pointed. A size 1 or 2 sizes larger, depending on how tight you knit, than the size that you're currently working with, and use that needle to bind off. And try as best as you can to keep your stitches loose. When you bind off all of those stitches that were currently on the needle and you get to this point in here, the end of the round, you will have 4 stitches left on your needle tip. At this point, you need to just cut that the yarn, leave about 1 foot, which is about 30 centimeters long, and then with a tapestry needle, thread that yarn tail through that tapestry needle. We're going to be grafting this edge. But to begin grafting, we are going to scoot these stitches to the right side, and also we are going to take notice of our cast on edge. So right here, notice that these loops at the bottom here at the beginning of the round or the I-cord, these are our cast on edge. And as we are trying to graft, we are going to follow the path of this edge. So you'll notice that this edge goes through this loop in here and this loop in here, and we are going to follow that. The first time we need to go to the top in here, then the next time just following through this edge, it's coming through from this side to this side, and we're gonna follow that as well. But first things first, so as we are working our normal bind off, the yarn is on the left hand side. What we're going to do is we are going to insert it purlwise through that first stitch and pull it all the way. And we don't want to tighten it too much, but we want it to be, we don't want any slack in the cable. I'm sorry, in the yarn right here. So you see, this is our yarn. We pulled through that stitch and we don't want too much slack in it. And at this point, I'm going to turn our work slightly so we can see the first stitch that we casted on. And we're just going to follow again this cast on edge, that path of that cast on stitch. And we're going to go through here and in through that first stitch and through that second stitch, and we're gonna keep this stitch in front of us for now. Then I'm actually gonna drop the stitch off the needle to make it easier for me to see that first stitch, and I'm going to insert the needle through the front of it, just like so, and then into the next stitch purlwise, and I'm going to draw my yarn just like that. Hope this makes sense. And next I'm actually going to turn a little bit the cast on edge, and I'm going to trace the next stitch of that cast on. But I'm going to trace it from right to left, just like that. And I'm actually going to drop the stitch off the needle for now. And oops, I dropped both, but that's okay. We'll put them back on. Those two stitches, I want to keep them here. And so I just want to make sure this is the stitch in here, my yarn that I'm working with. I just want to make sure it's similar size of the stitches that I made with knitting, normal knitting. And then I'm gonna go through the front of that stitch that I dropped off the needle on purpose and into the next stitch purlwise that's on my needle, just like that. And then I'm going to trace the path of the next cast on stitch. Oh, okay, I'm just gonna leave it off for now so it doesn't keep slipping. And so I'm to this moment where I need to trace this cast on stitch, so I'm going to pull my yarn through very gently. I don't want to lose this stitch, so I'm just gonna be gentle in here. Then I'm gonna go through the top of that stitch that I just used previously and through the back side of the next stitch, like that. And then at last I'm going to trace this last cast on stitch, and I'm gonna go through, let me find it first, just like this in here. And I'm going to take my needle in through the top of the stitch that I just on the bottom in here, and then you'll see all of these stitches are a little bit big, but very much the bottom, and rather the beginning and the end of the I-cord look pretty seamless. And I'm going to take some time to tighten these stitches a little bit. Like this. And here we go. All I have to do now is actually kind of weave in this tail, and whether I weave it in through the I-cord, there's tons of space there, or flip it to the back and weave it in here. Doesn't matter, but you'll see in here also even the back of this I-cord looks pretty seamless and looks pretty consistent in here. Well, this has been fun working on this project. Thank you for watching and happy knitting.